Oh, okay. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to call the regular council meeting for Monday, February 24th to order. Before I start, a quick territorial acknowledgement. I respectfully acknowledge that we are meeting on the traditional territory of the Lekwungen-speaking peoples, represented today by the Kasepsum and Songhees nations, whose stewardship of these lands continues to this date. Approval of the agenda. May I have a mover and seconder to adopt today's agenda as presented, and receipt of the near and long-term agenda, please. Okay, thank you very much. That's Councillor Grove and Councillor Ward. Any discussion? Seeing none, call the question. All those in favor? Okay, that's unanimous. Move on. Mayor's message. I do have one message today. I'd just like to take this opportunity to do a really big shout out to a Colwood resident, Charlotte Gorley, who's formed a community group of 4 members and counting. They call themselves Pick Colwood. Pick is in P-I-C-K, promoting involvement in community cleanups with a K. And with the support of our volunteer coordinator, Angie Diderick, Charlotte has been successful in obtaining a CRD grant that will allow for research and data collection about the types and how much litter we have here in Colwood, and to track the amount and hopefully reduce over time. So really great initiative on her part. In fact, just as we were making this announcement here on last Friday, I don't know if you saw that on CTV News, but there was a young lady, Maya Lotz from Colwood, who is with the Scouts, and they started this beach cleanup thing down at the beach. Phenomenal what they're doing. And so she started that, and using her words, like I said, she's really committed to making the community clean. In her words, it's, if you keep on trying, it will make a big difference in the world. So my big shout out to Maya Lotz of Colwood. On that note, I will move on to adoption and receipt of minutes. May I have a mover and seconder for the adoption of the minutes from February 10th and receipt of the Special Infrastructure Committee meeting minutes from October 22nd, November 13th. Okay. Councillor Day and Councillor Jensen. Any opposed? Seeing none, motion carries. Public participation, there were no written submissions that were received for tonight's meeting, and no one registered for, I don't think electronically, no one's registered, correct?
No, my apologies. There was one written submission that has been attached to the agenda that went out at publication.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
So I get to move on to item 6, which is correspondence requiring council direction. And before I start, because we're doing, for those that watch this virtually or see it on YouTube after, I'll get Yasmin Hernandez to introduce her staff that will be speaking tonight. Yasmin.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I will be introducing item 6.1, where Kaitlyn Suzuki, planning technician with development services, will be taking us through the BC Housing Targets Progress Report form.
Okay, thank you. Over to you, Kaitlyn.
Thank you, Mayor Kobayashi. So the provided housing target progress report form was prepared following provincial requirements for Colwood's first reporting period, which took place from August 1st, 2004 to January 31st, 2005. So to be received by council with the recommendation that's submitted to the Minister of Housing as required. While the report shows that Colwood is well on track to achieving our year 1 target, I also wanted to highlight some additional units not yet captured in this first reporting period. So any developments that received their building permit before August 1st, 2004, but have not yet received occupancy or were not captured in this initial report. So for example, 2 large residential developments, one at 2676 Wolfert Road and one at 3564 Ryder Hedgedale Way, received building permits in 2003 and are expected to receive occupancy in the next few months. So the addition of these two developments alone would add over 400 new housing units and take Colwood close to our year 3 target. With over 500 units already in the development process, having received either development or building permit applications, or received development or building permits during the reporting period, we don't expect to have any issues with achieving our 5-year target of 940 units. If council has any questions about the report form, I'm also available to answer them.
Thanks very much. I'll open it to, it's pretty straightforward. I'll open it to council for questions. Okay, Councillor Day.
Thank you. I'm just looking for my spot. There was a couple of things that I just wanted to understand better. One was in regards to what exactly our housing target was, because when I read the report, it was 100 and some as the number, and we're reporting a net number of 96 having been achieved during the time frame, recognizing only those that have achieved occupancy permits. So what is our target for year 1?
Thank you, Councillor Day. Our target for year 1 is 178 units. So this first reporting period covered the first 6 months of year 1, where we had the 96 net new units.
And that's, I just want to clarify too, that's net units because you have to less the demolitions.
Correct. Yes, I saw that clearly in the report. There was also a couple of starred notes in between the bullets on the report. One, hard to identify what page it is, but underneath the units by rental affordability at the top of the page says only included applications adding housing units in application totals. I didn't understand the note.
Thank you, Councillor Day. So that note was just referring to, for the application totals, we didn't include applications that were for example, solely commercial units, or things like renovations, things that didn't involve the addition of housing units.
Right, and there was one more, I'm just trying to scan to find it. So of the 99 units that received occupancy, this is, I think, on the first page with numbers on it, it says star 99 units received occupancy, 53 buildings received occupancy. So I didn't understand what that note is trying to tell us.
Thank you, Councillor Day. So that note is speaking to, 53 building permits were issued. Some of these buildings had multiple units. So there were 99 total units that received occupancy, 53 buildings received occupancy.
Perfect. That helps a lot. Thank you.
Thanks very much. I don't see any other questions. I just have one quick question. What's the normal lead time? I know it would vary depending if it's a building or if it's a single dwelling. What's the normal lead time between a building permit issue and occupancy permit? Do you have a sort of a rule of thumb that you use for that?
Thank you, Mayor. So for building permits, they have a 2-year before they expire after issuance. They can be extended for an additional year, but often they're completed within that 2-year period.
Okay, thank you very much. That's clear. Okay, on that point, may I have a mover and seconder of the staff recommendation? Thank you, Councillor Grove and Councillor Olson. Discussion? Seeing none, are any opposed? Seeing none, motion carries unanimous. We'll move on to new business. And Yasmin, if I can get you to introduce our next speaker, please.
So next, for item 7.1 of the agenda, Mairi Bosomworth, Senior Planner with Development Services, will present her work on the proposed work plan to implement Bill 44.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, good evening, Mayor and Council. So tonight I will be presenting on our work plan for the implementation of Bill 44, Housing Statutes Residential Development Act. In alignment with the province's Home for People Action Plan, Bill 44 requires that all municipalities review and update their OCP and land use bylaws to 1, enable small-scale multi-unit housing to accommodate 2 to 6 units depending on the location and context to be permitted on predominantly single-family and duplex lots. And 2, align the OCP and land use bylaw with the housing needs report to ensure the city has the capacity to accommodate housing needs for the next 20 years. The updated housing needs report was endorsed by Council in December 2024. The alignment of the OCP and the land use bylaw must be completed by December 31st, 2025. The amendments for the small-scale multi-unit housing legislation was required to be completed on June 30th, 2024. On June 10th, Council adopted amendments to the land use bylaw, OCP, and parking bylaw, which were intended to address small-scale multi-unit housing legislation. On January 10th, 2025, the City of Colwood received a letter from the Minister of Housing and Municipal Affairs, which is attached to tonight's agenda, noting that further changes are required to comply with the intent of small-scale multi-unit housing legislation. The letter reminds the city of the legal requirements in Bill 44 that when developing a land use bylaw, that the applicable guidelines in the small-scale multi-unit housing policy manual and site standards must be considered. Staff are seeking Council's direction this evening to provide a response to the Minister with our proposed work plan to consider the guidelines and comply with Bill 44. So tonight I will be walking you through the proposed work plan to implement Bill 44. We are proposing 4 key phases, each with check-in points with Council. So starting with phase 1, the planning phase, which is to start now and end in April of 2025. We have identified an internal interdisciplinary team with members from most departments playing a role to bring this project to completion. As part of phase 1, we have commenced a comprehensive review of the provincial legislation and the policy manual to identify the necessary requirements for compliance with small-scale multi-unit housing legislation and proactive planning under Bill 44. We will also conduct a preliminary examination of other municipalities to understand the amendments they have implemented. This work will create a foundation for staff to develop a more detailed work plan, which will adhere to the 4-phase project approach, incorporate timelines and detailed information within each phase. And finally, we will develop an engagement plan to set expectations on engagement for this project and clearly identify who, what, and when we will be engaging. As mentioned, this phase will conclude with a report to Council on April 28th, 2025, with a more detailed work plan and an engagement plan. The second phase is engagement, which will occur throughout the project until the completion in December. This plan will focus on setting expectations to Council and the public on what engagement will look like. Given the nature of this project and how it is provincially mandated, much of the engagement will be at the informed level. However, staff will seek opportunities to consult the public if instances for residents to evaluate implementation options arise. The engagement plan will also include various engagement techniques, depending on the audience, a targeted engagement component to residents who are directly impacted by proposed amendments, and the launching of Let's Talk Colwood page. The third phase will involve our GIS department conducting a zoning capacity and geospatial analysis to determine if our land use and OCP can support our housing needs for 20 years. We will review the findings from our literature review against our bylaws, including the OCP, land use bylaw, parking bylaw, and the subdivision and servicing bylaw to identify specific regulations that require amendments. Although the detailed work plan will be presented to you in April, this will be the phase when we identify amendments to comply with the small-scale multi-unit legislation. which is expected to include updates to our residential zones in the land use bylaw. We will incorporate the guidelines in the policy manual, which includes direction on setback, height, parking, lot coverage, and more. This phase will conclude with an update to council on August 25th, 2025, with a summary of the analysis work and a what we heard report, which will detail the engagement activities carried out during this phase. And finally, phase 4 is policy development. We will draft amendments to the affected bylaws, providing both clean and red line versions as necessary. These amendments will be introduced to council in the early fall to ensure completion by this December 2025 deadline. This phase includes a report to council, similar to those that typically accompany bylaw amendments, alongside a what we heard report summarizing our engagement activities for this phase. So that is a high-level summary of our proposed work plan. As mentioned, phase 1 planning will be complete in April with a report to council highlighting more detailed information about the work plan and engagement plan. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mairi. Yeah, great report. I'll start it off. I just have a couple questions here. The policy development, when will we see that? You gave us specific dates for everything except for that one. Is that going to be like October, November sort of timeframe, or?
So the phase 3 will be coming to council August 25th with a summary of the analysis.
Right.
And then we will proceed to council early fall, probably late September, to start readings of the bylaws.
Thank you. And second question, are you going to be the project manager on this?
I am, that's correct.
Okay. And the last question I have is how many person hours is this going to take? What's the level of effort from staff on this? I just want to make sure you feel that you're fully staffed to do this. Working from side of the desk just doesn't work, and just want to make sure that you feel comfortable that you're staffed properly for this.
So certainly this is a priority project for our department. On April 28th, we will be returning to council with a more detailed work plan that will identify timelines and specific information for each phase. But we are confident that we can complete the project on time.
Okay, thank you very much. I'll turn it over to Councillor Jensen.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you, Mairi. This is fantastic. Just a couple of things come to mind. Are we playing catch up a bit on this? I felt like we were ahead of the curve, and now all of a sudden there's a whole bunch more work to be done. Are we where we should be? Are we a little bit behind? Are we a little bit ahead? Where do we fit in across the region or around the province?
Jasmine, I know you're itching. I saw that finger.
Yes, so through the chair to Councillor Johnson. So we had, so the first step of implementing Bill 44 was a component around small scale housing. And that one had a deadline of delivery of last year, kind of June of last year. So that work was started off by the community planning team, and we had a scope of work that we thought was sufficient to meet the intent of the legislation. But this year, in January, we received a letter that I guess made us aware that that the work that we had undertaken wasn't sufficient enough for us to meet their criteria. So we are taking the work that the community planning team did and building from that and creating a work plan that we believe will now meet the expectation of the province. I guess in hindsight, it's always easier being able to look at what other counterparts have done. And we have had a good year with the material that has been put out by the province. So we are confident that we understand the scope of the work and the ask.
Thank you. And I mean, clearly from the letter from the minister, they're quite engaged with sort of where we're at. Which I find interesting because it's quite detailed. I think it's a great plan, and let's get on with it. And one further question, where does this, I'll ask it to anybody for that matter, but where does this work fit in with our the expected 2024 OCP update? I mean, I'd hate to think we're duplicating anything or not, but is this in concert with that and happening all at the same time, or do we have to wait for this to finish before we embark on that review?
Well, currently the work plan that we have prepared speaks to complying with Bill 44 because we want to respond to the province with a very pointed program to build the confidence on our expectation and delivery to a timeline. If you look at the work plan that is presented tonight, it has very clear check-in points with council because it's a tight turnaround. So we want to give clarity to that piece of work. The 5-year OCP review can happen concurrently. And there are pieces that we will be integrating as part of this work plan, like the gateway plan will be part and parcel of Bill 44 because it touches on our transit-oriented areas. And so integrating the gateway plan makes sense under the Bill 44 work. And we will look at our scope of work and try to create the most amount of conversations with the community to advance the OCP review, knowing that it is a very discrete scope of work to get us to a specific deadline. And I know that there will be a 5-year review OCP that is much more comprehensive that will likely happen concurrently with these, and that another report will, I'm sure, be forthcoming with a work plan for that work.
Thank you, because I guess my concern in looking at this timeline, if we're, we're already sort of behind the 8 ball from the 5-year review, and then this work is before us, and so then is our OCP in its entirety, 2 years out of date by the time we circle back and take a look at this. Those are my concerns, and I'm hoping that we can fit all this together and be done by the end of the year would be my my hope. And I see the Chief Administrator has his hand up, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Johnson.
Thank you, Mayor Kobayashi. We received this letter from the minister, and well, quite frankly, we were all a bit surprised when we saw what was contained within it. And rather than just drafting a letter to the ministry saying what we were going to do, we thought it was important to bring this work plan forward to council because it does impact our capacity. We only have a finite capacity to deal with all of these items, whether it's OCP, the different planning work that we've got. What we will be doing is bringing an operational plan that will show you, because we are now focusing on this work, this is the other work that gets delayed. So Councillor Jansen, you're talking about the OCP. It would have an impact there, but what other projects does it impact as well? So we want to bring this to you in its entirety so you can see the capacity box. So we're not just adding more and more and more. It's what projects have to get deferred or delayed, and that's a council choice. We'll say these are the ones that we recommend deferring with the dates and the timelines so that you're in the driver's seat to make sure that we're achieving what you wanted to achieve for the year.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Johnson.
Councillor Day.
Thank you. So many questions about how it'll all unfold, but some of them I'm just going to park because I know that we're going to get more information as we move further along here. But where I'm particularly curious is around the site level infrastructure and transportation demand management, which kind of goes hand in hand with the proactive rezoning that may be able to happen. I think that's kind of one of the areas where we potentially have the biggest number impact when we're looking to provide affordable homes for people in Colwood. So I guess I'm trying to focus my comments there. And it goes on in that paragraph to speak about the province is, I believe, allowing us to secure road dedications at the building permit stage through that. But it doesn't speak so much about the infrastructure, because some of the areas that may fall within that may have some, well, like many areas in Colwood, some interesting land formation that is being built on that may require some special consideration or extra work to make sure that it has good longevity. So I'm just wondering, how will we get to that kind of technical information when we're not yet working with developers in a cost-effective way?
To Councillor Day, through the chair to Councillor Day. So the technical analysis that the province wants us to do for these small scale housing is basically focusing on whether so the legislation, the Local Government Act has changed to say you are not entitled to the 4-unit minimum density unless you are connected to sewer. So you have to be a lot that is connected to sewer to be entitled the minimum density of 4 units per lot. And so there will be a report forthcoming, and it's part of a conversation with the sewer piece. Like there's a lot of work being done by the engineering team and other departments that is advancing the conversation to come back to council with a discussion around sewer. So this particular kind of the servicing conversation around small scale housing is around sewer and unlocking the density potential that the province is given is very much subject to sewer. And so that's a larger piece, a larger conversation with council. It's a way to manage growth or lobby for additional support to help us reach that base density in a good number of our Colwood properties that are not connected to sewer and where we don't expect that connection to come anytime soon. So it is absolutely at the top of the conversations that we need to have. It's a bigger conversation, and it will be led by the engineering team in a forthcoming conversation with council.
So is it, I didn't understand that the infrastructure was only for the smooths. I thought that that was related to pre-zoning, which would include the triangle lands.
Yes, so the pre-zoning, so we have now had more opportunity to understand what is meant by that pre-zoning. In our understanding of the province mandate, we are only required to pre-zone properties if our official community plan is delivering fewer units of housing than what is required within our 20-year scope. We can confidently say that our OCP holds more density than we need for the next 20 years based on our updated housing needs assessment. There's a lot of density allocated throughout the city already based on today's OCP to more than meet our 20-year target. So we are actually not mandated to upzone any properties right this minute. What we are mandated to do is to grant the small scale minimum thresholds of 4 to 6 units to single family lots if they are connected to sewer. So we don't have to upzone, only if we feel like the upzoning will help us get to the 20-year housing target. We don't foresee that being necessary. But we will be bringing forward any need for that if that emerges through our analysis. We just don't think it'll be necessary.
I guess I'll have to wait and see, but yeah, just I was just more concerned about the infrastructure and how we do that for pre-zoning. But a lot of our work is going to be looking at single-family housing neighborhoods currently for upzoning. And I'm just wondering, what you said sort of is the opposite of that. We have a lot of capacity in the areas that are designated with sewer capacity. And that's not the same. So I guess I'll wait for the results, but I hope we're not spending money on analyzing things that we're not within 20 years of doing.
Well, the mandate to do the small scale housing analysis comes from the province. So it is a methodology that is given to us. So the GIS methodology, it is a prescripted methodology that we need to follow to be able to confirm that we have that capacity within our OCP. So that is required and mandated through the province. And I think that's why the Bill 44 is split into two deliverables. One is the small scale housing and doing an analysis that focuses on single detached lots and how do you give them the potential of 4 to 6 units. And it has given criteria, and so that's one piece. And then the other piece is about assessing the official community plan and the housing needs, the 20-year housing needs. Are there locations of priority for density where we need to upzone to meet that target? As I said, we don't think that is the case, but we will. We will learn more as we do the analysis and get there. So it's almost two separate conversations. The mandated minimum of 4 to 6 is irrespective of the capacity within the 20 years based on our housing needs. Basically, the province is telling us there is no single family lots anymore. They should all be able to capture 4 units, 4 to 6 units.
Great. Thank you. I appreciate the clarity.
Thanks very much. And Councillor Ward.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First, I thank staff for the work that you put into this. I know it's a significant lift and, we're mandated to do it, but it doesn't change the volume of work that you have to do. Rather than question it, I really just wanted to make the point that I thought it was a little presumptuous of Minister Kaitlyn to say that we share his goals. I'll be very clear. I think there's a significant number of people in this province that believe that housing affordability can't be achieved through ignoring infrastructure realities or dismissing the voice of local government. BC needs a housing strategy that empowers municipalities, make us partners, not adversaries. And I really found it interesting that recently the only movement of the needle on vacancies came when they started the federal government at the federal level started addressing the demand side of the supply and demand equation. So, we have a plan that ostensibly is supposed to deal with affordable housing issues. Really, that's the crux of it. It doesn't touch affordability really at all. It deals with market housing, and as a byproduct of that, rewards the folks that essentially finance the campaigns of the people in power right now. So I don't buy it. I think Sioux Councillor Al Beddoes, I've never met him, but he said it best when he voted for this the other day, that he did it only because there was a gun to his head. Really, there's no choice. They've left us no choice. It isn't a partnership at all. Many small communities are facing, a huge lift in terms of the capacity challenge from staff, tearing up, community plans, disregarding years and years of community input and planning, and having to essentially start from scratch on a very limited timeline. So, I would suggest that I will vote for it because obviously we have to do the work. We're doing the work, and I don't want to be an impediment to staff in that regard. But I join roughly 49% of this province that feels that this government doesn't have a mandate to push this down our throats and change the fabric of our communities. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And seeing no other questions, I will call the question. Everyone 7.1, the staff recommendations there is pretty straightforward. Can I get some of them? Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Jensen and seconder, please. Oh, Councillor Grove, thank you. Discussion? Seeing none, any opposed? Seeing none, motion carries unanimous. Yeah, it's a tough one, that's for sure. Next person, if you could, Yasmin, is that's, you can introduce, please?
Yes, so next, to introduce item 7.2 of the agenda, Desiree Givens, Planner 2 with Development Services, will be walking us through the work plan for a public art policy that we're looking to develop.
Thank you and good evening, Mayor and Council. So as Jasmine mentioned, I'm here to present the work plan for the public art policy. The purpose of the policy will be to establish a clear, transparent and standard process for how the city of Colwood manages and funds public art within the city. The creation of a public art policy will support the following two resolutions that you see here on the screen, including resolution number R 2020-499, which directed staff to develop a policy and hold a professional art competition, and resolution number R 2022-125, which directed staff to report to council on the implementation of a public art master plan for Latoria South. The policy will guide staff in next steps to review and implement a public art master plan for Latoria, as well as hold a public professional art competition. As well, the official community plan recommends as an action item to be completed in 2023 or later that the city develop an arts and culture plan to set direction for arts and culture amenities, resources, and opportunities. While the proposed project will not result in the development of a comprehensive arts and culture plan, the public art policy will be a starting point and a foundation for this plan as we work to create a more comprehensive plan in the future. So in the next few slides, I will be providing a little bit more information, but essentially they were proposing a 4-phase project that will entail a mix of activities related to planning, engagement, analysis, and policy development. We're aiming to create the policy and have it endorsed by council by November of this year. Over the next month, phase 1 will be wrapping up phase 1 of the project. So this will include creating a project team, defining the scope and objectives of the project, and reviewing our existing policies as well as funding resources, researching best practices from other municipalities, and identifying partners and stakeholders, as well as creating a plan to engage them. So on March 24th, we'll be returning to council with a communications and engagement plan, which will speak to how we're going to engage partners and stakeholders, and when, and methods for communicating, and as well as summarizing who will be on the project team and the scope and objectives. So you'll see that very soon. In phase 2 of the project, we will be notifying public partners and stakeholders, conducting engagement, and reviewing the feedback to identify top themes that are emerging from the community engagement. We'll return to council in July, I believe, as with a what we heard report following the completion of this phase. In phase 3, the engagement and research findings from both the engagement phase and the initial background review will be analyzed as well to support the development of a draft policy, which council will see following the end of this phase. I think we're aiming to bring this draft policy back to council in the fall of 2025. And then lastly, in phase 4, after council has seen and commented on the draft policy, this will be circulated for the review and feedback from stakeholders and partners. This policy will then be revised and brought back to council for final endorsement and adoption. And like I mentioned earlier, we're aiming for November 2025 for that final endorsement. So tonight we're mostly just seeking direction from council to proceed with the proposed work plan as shown, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have at this time.
Okay, thanks very much. We shall pass over to Councillor Day.
Thank you. I know it's early days and that you're just developing the policy in the next little while, but what is it that we envision having, after we hold a public art competition, would that result in pieces of public art being permanently installed in the city of Colwood? Or is that money in the pockets of artists? I'm just trying to determine what is the net benefit for the $42,000 that we would be expending?
Thank you for the question, Councillor Day, and through the chair. The 42,000 would result in an art policy, so it wouldn't necessarily result in a public art piece being installed on on city property necessarily. The result of this project specifically would be to create a policy which will guide decision making around public art. So when artists come in for funding to use the Community Amenity Contribution Fund or the Public Art Reserve Fund, the city would have a standard process for how we would be reviewing those requests and making sure that it's fair and consistent and very transparent for the public and anyone coming in.
So that gets, the $20,000 gets you the policy, and a further $22,000 gets a competition. I'm just wondering what the competition does.
Yes, certainly, and thank you for the question. So the public art competition, I believe, as a result of the COVID-19 economic recovery plan. So this was intended to be used for the city to host a competition to select an artist to install a one art piece. It could be a sculpture, it could be just something to be seen on, and it would be on like parkland or publicly owned land. I don't think that's within the scope of this project to develop the policy, but that will be a next step that staff will be looking at moving forward with after the completion of this policy.
I'm sorry, I'm confused because it does say that in the project background that it includes $22,000 for the competition. I'm just finding it hard to support $42,000 for a policy.
Yeah, maybe I will add some further context. So the council resolution that spoke to that the budget for the project, the policy, and the competition happened in 2020. So it's an enacted or an outstanding direction from council that was never fulfilled. So when you bring it forward to now, what we really need is to define the framework through which council will make decisions on what art and where would it be located and how to fund those pieces. So there is community amenity contributions, there is a fund and a public art fund. There's several sources of funding that have been put aside over the years that speak to that public art intent, but there isn't a process through which decide what money gets spent where and what is art worthwhile to invest in. So what we're looking to create here is that policy. The budget for the development of the policy, we will need to come back once we have a more detailed plan to give you an estimation. We anticipate that this will be done largely through staff, so we're not we're looking to be selective on the consulting resources that we use, like subject matter experts where needed, but this is a staff-led project that is conscious of the funding constraints for the project because it is a 5-year-old kind of budget item that may not have captured what it would cost today. So it's being led by staff, and we will come back with a more clear scope of the financial implications in March when we have a clearer understanding of our partners and stakeholders, who's going to be participating, and what strategy we have to create these in a cost-effective and timely manner. included in this report or attached to the agenda is a letter from Path Development, where they have already come forward with a desire to partner on the installation of art in the Commons Plaza. The Parks Master Plan for Latoria South alone speaks to a delivery or 5 or 6 public art pieces. If we look at the beachlands, it's equally, there's 10 public art pieces. But I think a policy, a Colwood-wide policy should speak to the distribution of art throughout the community, not just master plan communities. And so to create a framework of fairness, we need to make sure that it's not just our master plan communities that can come in and request funds for specific pieces of art, but that there's also community-based artists and programs run by the city or other partners and stakeholders. So we just want to make sure that we create this framework before we start engaging with larger developers that may just have first dibs, or they come forward with an ask quicker than we are actually able to present a fair policy to help us make decisions.
Yeah, well, I have looked at art policies before, and I do support having an art policy. I'm just not very comfortable with the financials attached to this particular item because it's not recent and it has been sitting, and I just don't have a clear vision of what we're doing with this money. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Councillor Ward?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I think the line of questioning from Councillor Day is I'm somewhat aligned with that. Yasmin, I think, great explanation, very detailed, and I agree as well that we need some sort of framework. You need some sort of policy in place to determine what is fair, what is equitable, what stakeholders should be involved. We know there's sensitivities around, Indigenous, relations and others, but I think to me what's missing is phase one planning on that first slide where it says define the project scope. If I refer back to how I would do it in the private sector, it would be define the project scope and budget right off the get-go. What is this going to cost us to develop a policy? And I'd like to separate that out from this other, now pretty old recommendation or vote to conduct a competition on it. I think that's redundant at this stage. I mean, to be blunt, it's not 2020 anymore. I think people were probably well-intentioned at the time that things like this were going to bring people together and do things in the community, but we're well past that now. It's 2025. So I can't support the full amount. And in fact, I'd really rather see us go back to the drawing board and just say, okay, who needs to be involved? What's the capacity required from staff? What do we need to do to effectively consult with stakeholders and draft something? And then even if it's a preliminary budget to say, okay, we're talking X number of hours and approximately 5K to make this happen, I'd be more comfortable with something like that. I do again want to say thank you for bringing it forward. I think it's something that is a legacy item that's been sitting out there. But I think now too many years have passed for this to be relevant for me to support it anymore. But I thank you for the work on it though.
Thank you very much. Councillor Jansen?
Thank you. I think it does behoove us to formulate some kind of policy that governs with the where and the when and the how, and perhaps provide some guidelines as we do in many areas. But can you tell me where this fits in with private lands? And if a developer or I guess anybody in the community comes forward and says, we'd like to put something up on our property. I guess aside from bylaws implications, but do we have a reference document that might provide some guidance for someone? And I'm thinking of that building down at across from Hatley Plaza there, where they did put up a native theme piece of artwork on the wall there, and it was quite interesting and perhaps appropriate. But do we have language that in a policy somewhere that regulates that, or is that just part of the planning process? Or
Through the chair to Councillor Jansen. So we actually, I'm gonna say strongly encourage the incorporation of public art on buildings and private property as part of design guidelines.
Mhm.
So we leverage the development permit review process to achieve art on buildings that is funded solely by developers to enhance maybe building facades that are plain or that don't have a ton of interest, but where we do identified um, possibilities, public art is our first go-to. So just including public art that is solely funded by the developer to enhance and meet a design guideline that is part of the work that we do when we review development proposals. And I think this speaks to why the need of this policy is important, because then we do have other proponents that may want to locate public art on private property. Is that a priority? Should that be public art is on public owned property and art that is located on private property should be funded by a developer? When is an appropriate partnership and the scale and scope of that? I think that's what this policy will help us decide, or even articulate an advisory body that could help council make those decisions. I think that the policy will give us a structure as to how to go about investigating the options when a proposal comes forward.
Thank you. And I think that was the answer that I was expecting. But I guess my point is if a developer or building owner decides that, you know, some graffiti-like art is their jam and we don't, I mean, how do you resolve that divide? I mean, I would hate to think that the planning department is in a room negotiating with the developer on an item like that. So I guess the question comes back to, do we define what it is for our community, or at least establish some yardsticks? I mean, I guess art is in the eye of the beholder to some degree, but I mean, we speak to design guidelines on everything else. So, you know, I would expect that we would have some guidance for people in this regard.
Certainly, we can look at, as part of our OCP review, to incorporate some general guidance around art that is installed that is viewable from a public street or the public realm. We do not currently have, I almost want to say we don't, but I vaguely remember that we may have a document that speaks to art or appropriate art in parks, and that it does speak to kind of like, of course, it can be discriminatory, like a high level criteria, but I think it's very specific to park or city owned. I do believe that we have some language around that, and Sandra is not here tonight, but I believe it's one of her documents that she kind of manages.
I won't hold you to it, but I think you take the point that
Like we do have some broad general scope to some specifics, but nothing that lives in the official community plan or a bylaw, and nothing that guides, I'm gonna say, public art at large in the city of Colwood. And we have seen art like Colwood Corners, some of the parkade, the well in the Fort Rod Hill images. I mean, some like beauty is on the eye of the beholder. And I will leave it at that. And all that we could negotiate is that there was an art piece created by a local artist, and those two met that criteria. And it was basically at the selection of the property owner without input from city staff, because you're correct, we're planners, not necessarily artists. So we leave it.
Thank you. Yeah, I hear what you're saying, and I concur quite a bit. The only thing I'll say to wrap up, Mr. Mayor, is, I would love to see some work done on this policy. I'm not sure how I feel yet about moving directly to some type of competition, but I'll wait to hear what my peers think.
Thank you. Mr. Johnson, would you like to say something? Or,
Sorry, yes. I just wanted to clarify for council that the 2025 budget does not include the 20,000 for the policy because that was descoped earlier when we issued an RFP and there was nobody that responded to do that work. So the current 2025 budget is the 80,000 for the arts and culture plan, public art policy. And then that amount did come forward though for the competition, which our notes indicate that that was some kind of collaborative exercise with Colwood Art Society. So that is the current 2025 budget and the policy is happening in-house unless planning come forward with another proposal for council to consider. 101 in total, so 80,000 for the there's a fancy word in here. Arts and culture plan, and then the other 21,000 was for the competition that carried forward. Well, the report, because of the way our budgets come forward, there was a $42,000 budget at that time. That is accurate, but then it got dropped in 2025. So that was the budget, and then they change year over year, as you're aware, and it is hard to follow.
so just clarify then, so there is or isn't 42,000? I think you said.
In the 2025 budget,
Yes.
there is only the 21,000 for the competition,
Oh.
and then the 80,000 for the arts and culture plan. Well, within that 42,000, that's the 20 and 22, and then 1,000 was spent, and that's why it reduced from 22 to 21. So there was the math works, but it's probably not well presented is all for you to follow from plan to plan.
Councillor Grove, please.
Hey, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think my question was somewhat dealt with there, but I think what I would say, because I don't need to ask to clarify what you just said, I'm not sure it's clear, but I'm trying to understand it. The money seems to be there. So with no policy, I think we have no art, public art. Public art, you can't legislate taste. So there's always battles around ugly. I can't imagine I can't recall, but I do remember there were almost riots in the streets downtown Victoria around the front of the arena there over the rock steel pillar post. I don't know what they called it. But when I go to a hockey game occasionally, I see kids crawling all over that thing. The public's engaging with it. And I think that public art is a really important aspect of our cultural setting and landscape of the city. We talked to the bridge over the Galloping Goose on Souk Road. There was some discussion and accounting for a public piece of public artwork there. But with no policy, how do you go about it? So I support this work to go forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Wilson.
Well, thank you. I think I just have a question for Yasmin directly. I think we can all agree that a public policy is important and that we need one. And I don't ever want to assume, I've learned never to do that in this job, but like looking at the township of Esquimalt, they have a public art plan policy in place and a workflow chart. And I'm just wondering, are we looking at some of the other municipalities' policies and taking that work that's already been done into consideration for potentially building a new policy?
Yes, absolutely. So that's part of the work that Desiree is working on. So we are looking at recent art policies, Esquimalt being one of the municipalities close to us that it's a fairly recent policy, and we have made contact with staff there and to understand their process. I think to further clarify the budget, like we are doing this in-house. So it is Desiree and Kaitlyn that will be leading the project. So we're not hiring a consultant to give us further advice. We understand that there is enough precedent of how other municipalities have gone about it. And then we are, at this point, we haven't made a budget allocation specifically asking to fund the development of the policy. So there's a budget item for the competition that is part of the 2025 piece, the 80-some thousand that is part of the Colwood Art Society. What is it?
Sorry, the Arts and Culture Plan.
So there's an arts and culture plan, and then there is a competition. So those two items are carried forward from previous council conversations, and they remain funded through the 2025 budget. This work of developing the policy has no budget item associated with it because we're gonna do it in-house. If we were to find that we need consultant support, then we will flag that for you at our March report, identifying whether we need additional resources. At this point, we think that we can go forward, develop the scope of work, identify the stakeholders, and through that work, see where additional resources may be needed.
Because I feel like, and I want to speak for everybody, that we are struggling. Maybe we need to separate these two items, that we're looking specifically at developing a policy, understanding what that is going to cost. And then as far as this competition, I think for me personally, that's needs to be put aside. And we're just specifically looking at developing the policy first. And those are just my thoughts on that. So maybe that's a direction that we want to take so that we can move forward.
Great comments. Thank you very much. Councillor Dave, second on Councillor Dave. So I guess I get to ask my questions first then. Yasmin, can you give me an estimate of the person hours to accomplish developing the art policy? I need to understand that in my own head. How many person hours is that approximately?
Desiree, do you have a clear idea of that tonight? And we may need to come back with that in our March report. But we do have a rough estimate of where we would need to be in November for us to have a policy. So I'll let Desiree elaborate.
Thank you.
Desiree, please.
Yes, so Kaitlyn and I are prioritizing this amongst our other projects within the city, including supporting Mairi and the rest of the project team on the Bill 44 items, as well as managing our file applications. So I don't have an exact number that I can give you, but I can definitely report back on this. But I do imagine that we'll be dedicating, between 10 to 20% of our work hours a week to this project.
Wow. Okay, there's a reason for my madness here. So, there's something called urgent and there's something, important. This is important. I don't think it's urgent, just in my viewpoint. So direct question. So what's the ramifications if we were to delay this? And, so we can get the urgent stuff done right now in a timely manner. I don't know everything, I'm dying to see the operational plan because we'll have a better understanding right now. We're just trying to help, from a governance point of view. It's not, there's no criticism meant here. But I guess my direct question is, what are the ramifications if we were to delay this, by 8 months or 10 months or whatever?
Yeah, I think we would proceed as we have, and we would encourage the incorporation of public art on buildings as part of development permits. And if an applicant comes forward wanting to put public art on private property, it is their decision. It is the art piece that they choose without funding support from the city. So it gets if someone were to come forward with a proposal and a request for community amenity contributions, we will bring it forward with a request to council with a budget item and with a presentation of the RPs. So it would be kind of a one-off, and that's how we have handled it to date. So it is much like you say, important, but not critical to the operations of the city, because we do have a process.
Because all the time I've been on council, I think twice it's come up.
Yes.
Art pieces, so it's not much. And I know there's one that's being looked at right now at down at the Path Lands, Gablecraft, and it's private property. But you know, the great thing about it is they've involved the city, they've involved Arts and Culture Colwood. You know, they're getting all the stakeholders involved in it. So I think the right decision's going to be made there, from what I understand. So I just I'm just becoming more and more aware of, you know, like what the pressures on what everyone is right now. And just to me, I know this is important, but I just don't see this as a burning, urgent thing that we should be, you know, without an understanding of what the level of effort is right now to be making a motion and making you guys do the work on. But that's just my own humble opinion. But I do share the same feelings as others here that you know, it's the dollar values. I'm not too sure. I'm still not too sure about what this art competition is for $22,000. I just don't understand that. So by endorsing this, we're endorsing the money being spent. I'm assuming. So that's why I can't vote for this right now at this point in time unless there's an amendment to the motion itself. Anyways, I shall turn it over a second time to Councillor Day. Oh, Mr. Johnson.
Considering the questions, considering council's concern with work plans and how does this fit in with the other work that we have in development services, be appropriate for council to defer this. Defer this until we have the operational plan, and you can look at everything together, because right now we are looking at this as in isolation, and it's really hard to see that, okay, if we don't do this work, how does this elevate the priority of other work that we have? And that's the whole intention behind building that operational plan. So council's strategic plan is the grand vision, and the operational plan is how we get there every year and what sort of capacity we have to deal with other emerging issues and what sort of capacity this takes. And Mayor Kobayashi, you're asking the number of staff hours that goes into these projects. And that's certainly something I'm making note of for our financial considerations moving forward, that we've got these contained within the report so that council can see. We're not unlike other organizations whereby we should be accounting for that time so that we can see what sort of capacity this takes out. So if I understand council's concern, and it might be more appropriate to look at this request within the context of the operational plan, and we'll highlight that once you have all of that information, with the intention to bring that to council by April 30th.
So I know there's two hands, but can I get someone to make the motion to defer this, please? Councillor Day. Thank you very much. And seconder, Councillor Grove. And I know that some lights going off here. I will open it to discussion on this then. Please.
Yeah, I was just gonna say that.
No, this is the deferment, sorry.
Oh.
Yeah.
So you mowed my grass, because I was gonna make the motion to refer it back to staff. And I think a deferral, the part I would like to, the only piece I would add to this is I don't want this back again. What's here, I find I'm confused, and as we went along further, I got more and more confused on the finances. I would prefer something different to come back that speaks specifically to the plan, would be my preference, if we're looking to deferral. So something that's more concrete with the finance, something that's more concrete on public, private, you know, all that. I think you get the feeling from the discussion here tonight, so I won't beat that drum. Thank you.
So yes, that's a good point about deferment. I have to defer it to a council meeting in the future. April, is that reasonable, Mr. Johnson?
We're planning to have the operational plan to council prior to April 30th. So the intention was to bring that to the first meeting in in May for council's adoption. So I think that that would be appropriate. This isn't imminent work. I think it can be useful for the delay based on the conversations around with council.
Thank you very much. Late May then, Mr. Johnson, thank you very much. Okay, any other discussion on this? And okay, I'll call the question. Any opposed? Seeing none, motion carries. Thank you very much. And thank you for all the work on this. It's good, but I just kind of worried. I'm worried about your times right now, believe me. Thanks a lot, Desiree. Okay, you're on tap again, Yasmin, for Mr. Roy.
So presenting agenda item 7.3 is Richard Roy, Senior Planner, and he will be walking us through bylaw amendments to the land use bylaw number 151, a council resolution speaking to automobile dealerships and surface parking.
Thank you, Yasmin, and good evening, Mayor and Council. So I don't have a presentation for you tonight, but I will walk you through with a brief overview of the staff report. So the report mainly addresses the council-driven resolution and historical mandate to limit the development of surface parking lots and auto sales in Colwood. So the report identifies the process to amend the land use bylaw to regulate just that, the establishments of business featuring surface parking lots for auto sales. In the report, there are 2 tables, and staff have identified 8 different land uses that enable the establishment of car dealerships in Colwood. Among those land uses and areas that would permit it, that are included on the Appendix 1, we also provide a table that identifies 10 existing car lot businesses within the city. There are 2 that are primarily located in Langford. Of these are longstanding businesses, with one newer one being granted a business license in April 2024. So the process to outright limit the amount of the car dealers in Colwood would be to remove these 8 specified uses from the bylaw, and then add in a new land use definition for automotive dealership, which we provided the definition for, and then add automotive dealership to the prohibited uses within the general regulations section of the bylaw, which would extend the prohibition of these uses throughout the entirety of the bylaw. The report also identifies that there are some implications by making these amendments. First off, this would require that any future car lot businesses seek a zoning amendment that has to be approved by council prior to future establishment. So that would give council an opportunity to review every future business. And then the existing businesses would be placed into a state of legal nonconformance, which would allow them to continue operations as they exist at the time of the bylaws given readings. The legislation includes limitations to what can and can't be done. And those things would have to occur on an application basis where staff could review whether they were within those limitations. So the staff recommendation is to provide a courtesy notification to property owners and tenants of all properties affected by the amendments to the bylaw, and then return back to council to give the bylaw first and second readings and, well, the formal bylaw readings. So yeah.
Okay, thanks very much. I'll open it to council for questions. Councilor Ward.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I suspect there'll be other lines of questions around the specifics of the dealerships listed and the bylaws themselves. I'd like to go back to the January 24th, 2022 regular council meeting, the original motion that was brought forward. And actually what intrigued me, and I key on it, is point 2, which was to incentivize the conversion of existing surface parking lots for auto sales to other uses that are in line with the OCP. And I note that that's not addressed here. I'm looking to understand when we would come forward with proposals on that. And I think for me, maybe I'm going to go beyond others. For me, it's not about preventing future use cases of automobile dealerships coming in. It's how do we deal with the mess that has existed for decades up Souk Road, the Colwood Strip, the gateway to our community that frankly is woefully unimpressive. And, I'd love to find a way to not only prevent further car dealerships from setting up shop, certainly in places like that, but how can we change things? How can, and it's going to be a slow process. Obviously, no one understands this isn't going to be a 2-year thing, but over the course of the next decade plus, how do we incentivize people to make Colwood's entryway or our gateway, ironically coming into our gateway lands, something better than the strip mall car lot fiasco that it evolved to be. So I'm really looking to better understand why point 2 isn't addressed and when we could expect something on that.
Staff. Yasmin.
Yeah, I would say the incentivizing the conversion of existing land uses would come through that gateway visioning. I think that was the intent and the premise behind creating a new vision for those lands. And hopefully by granting them a highest and best use within the official community plan, that property owners were incentivized to sell or redevelop to try and capture that latent potential that the OCP is giving them through the potential of high rises and 6 stories and a different type of development. So currently, most of those lands don't have, outside of ONI or the properties around Colwood Corners, the ONI control lands, there isn't a ton of additional land use potential that can be achieved. Our maximum height is 15 stories, and we know that 6 stories is a financially true and tested format. And then after 6 stories, you need more than 20 stories to make it financially feasible. The economies of its scale, how it pencils
and I think
out.
if I can interject, Yasmin, I absolutely agree with what you're saying. I think there's an inherent incentive to a property owner to, to redevelop because the monetary value is there. But how do we make sure that that is entrenched in our gateway plan as an active discussion, like that we're incentivizing, we're not assuming that they'll read between the lines, that we're actively taking it to them to say, Colwood wants you to do something different here. There's an opportunity here for you. Let us help guide you there. And then just more on just a detailed piece, because I don't have it in front of me and it would probably take forever to find it, but the gateway lands, would that extend all the way down to the border with View Royal? Like, does that go right to the bottom?
Yes, it does. It goes all the way to the border of View Royal, Gulfstream. Yeah.
Okay, and in the interest of expediency, I'll move on here, but I think when it comes time for discussion on Gateway, I think I'd like to see us make sure that there's a concrete, at least concrete language around incentivizing it. As Yasmin said, it's there, but let's make sure that it's a strategy that's documented versus something that's kind of understood. Thanks, Yasmin, appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Councillor Day.
Thank you. Being the resident historian, I can tell you that we absolutely made a huge effort in this respect in the past. And when we make this effort again, you will have every local owner of a car dealership coming in here and telling you why it's so important to our community and what all the benefits are. And we all drive cars and we'll hear it all. But the real reality is they're very aware of the economics of the land ownership. It's just that a car dealership has much lower costs to run a commercial business. That's the reality. One of these businesses was originally a mini golf that my children used to have birthday parties at. And then it got rezoned, was supposed to be a hotel. And then the parking lot kept getting bigger and bigger. And then it wasn't a hotel anymore, it was a car lot. We're not playing on a level playing field here necessarily. And we don't have a lot of tools in our tool belt to change things. So I will just put that proviso, but if you're going to consider trying to come up with a better carrot to get the car dealerships gone, it's going to take a lot more thinking. So I recommend the stick, only in that there's nothing I guess I can do after the fact based on the table that's been provided here and the zonings that have been achieved. If they have legally non-conforming status enshrined under the legislation, that's what they're holding. And that is an ace. So we need a different strategy if we want to achieve this. Maybe it's possible, maybe it's not, but can we at least get an understanding that this is not a desirable outcome for our community? Because we have a new dealership in spite of all those past efforts to not have new dealerships. And we have a temporary use permit, which I wish we'd had better advice before we approved it. So that's all I can say. It is what it is. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Councillor Day. Councillor Jensen, please.
Thank you, Worship. You know, I'll say it again. I started this ball rolling back in 2022, and here we are again. And we're beyond this community being a destination for you to come and buy a used or a new car or an RV or any of that stuff. We have done a lot of work with our core redevelopment, the plan around that area, and I love the idea of incentivizing that, a move in that direction. But I did have a few questions so that we can move things along. But along the lines of Councillor Day, the temporary use permit that's attached to a legal non-conforming lot, where does that bring us in 2026 when that comes up as far as legal non-conforming versus a temporary use permit? Because I voted in favor of that temporary use permit with the knowledge that it's coming back after this bylaw was to be redone.
Yeah, so the temporary use permit will expire in 2026, at which time they would have to reapply. Actually, they would have to reapply for a 3-year extension, I believe, at that point. But yeah, once that expires, the use is.
So because it's attached to a legal non-conforming lot, it doesn't change the fact that it's a temporary permit for that extension that they made.
No.
Thank you. If one of these operations changes ownership, what happens?
So the legislation does allow it to carry on with the change in ownership. If the use is not active for a period of time, I believe it's 6 months,
Okay.
then you lose it.
Right.
Yeah, I'll leave it there.
Gotcha. So they have the right to sell their business and it can carry on with that same business permit, I guess, is the idea.
That's correct, yeah.
Thank you. I'm disappointed but not surprised. Thank you. And then help me out because I didn't see anything in here, but there was a part of that motion was to there was language attached to that motion, as I recall, about a moratorium on anything in the interim that might slip through the cracks. Is that still in place? Because unless I'm missing something here, I don't really see that. If someone can advise me.
Yeah, so without making the bylaw amendments, there really is no way to do a moratorium. The use is technically permitted. We would have to be able to issue the business license legally. Yeah.
Thank you. So that's important. Can you please explain the difference between staff option 1 and staff option 2 so I'm absolutely clear? Well, loosely, while you're looking, am I reading it right that that the option 2 is that we decide on this tonight?
Correct. Yeah. So I attached, so in Appendix 3 is the proposed bylaw, which is ready to go.
Thank you. That was my read on that, and I will have a motion when you're ready, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Grove?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was just thinking also that the incentive to move on and out would come with the value of the land and the value of the site reaching a point where they would simply move. The Colwood is certainly not the suburban bedroom community that it once was, and I think we're all trying very hard to be more than that. I understand then that the once they move, they can't relocate in Colwood if that were their intent. Is that right? I'm just trying to clarify.
I mean, they could make an application for a zoning amendment that would allow
Sure.
them to, however,
Yeah.
that would come before council for a decision.
Okay, and I'm thinking about when that Souk focal point that the Triangle Gateway lands develops to the point where it is wall-to-wall 8 to 25-story buildings, and in large cities you see car dealerships embedded in the main buildings. They don't have those big vast parking lots full of cars. That wouldn't be allowed presumably under this, but by that time things will have changed to the point where such a scenario may be allowed, I suppose. I'm just sort of speculating. That's a little too far off, I think. The other thing I want to consider though is about the fact that dealerships provide a lot of service repair shops. So for those that need that, there would be a demand in Colwood for car repair, which would then no longer be met by an awful lot of vehicles. Is there any consideration there on how that is affected? I'm just sort of more wondering what effect that might have upon the industry in general. Are we just chasing a lot of good business out of Colwood? And I'm not in favor of car lots, but they do have their place, I suppose. So this bylaw doesn't speak to that aspect. It's strictly automotive dealerships that are buying and selling cars. Is that right? Do I have that?
Correct, with ancillary repair automotive uses. So
that's allowed within.
yeah, there are other uses in the bylaw that would permit strictly service repair, but it's more the automotive sales portion, which takes up more lot than the repair.
So were someone to have a showroom in a contained new building that was all decorated with public art and looked wonderful, be allowed to store their vehicles outside of Colwood and simply operate a sales type of structure, facility, service facility within this area?
I would venture to say yes, they would. As you know, obviously the cars wouldn't be allowed to be stored on the lot. You know, if it was you see them in larger municipalities and cities that they'll have just the Tesla inside the showroom. But yeah.
Yeah, so that can happen, and presumably they get creative. So there's lots of opportunity for the dealers themselves, I think, to grow and build with, and I support this the bylaw restriction. I think that, yeah. Okay, thank you. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Councillor Olson?
I feel like we've talked about this quite a bit, but I just wanted to say that I think the staff recommendation really works for what we were looking to achieve here, at least for me personally. I do like that, you know, we're not trying to chase out the current dealerships that we have here. They are limited to being able to expand their business. But, you know, and like it stated that if that business is sold, the new buyer can continue to operate. It limits the expansion of current business and development of new or establishment of new dealerships. And that any new business would have to seek approval by way of, I mean, it's all reasonable to me. All of this is reasonable. It doesn't mean that in the future, should we decide that there is somebody comes forward that you know, we want to be able to allow them to establish and set up shop here, we can certainly do that. But I think that this is, you know, achieving what we were looking to do. It's unfortunate that we had one slip by us in April. You know, I'm a little concerned about the temporary use permit. We're going to get a little bit of, you know, somebody's going to be upset from that. But I just wanted to move the staff recommendation. I do think that we need to allow that courtesy notification to go out to current businesses. Yeah, thank you for your work on this.
Yep, thank you very much. Before I go to you, Councillor Jensen, I think you're going to make the motion, I think. I just wanted to make sure, and I do understand this now, I just wanted to make sure we weren't cutting off our nose to spite our face on this. It does produce good revenues for the city, but yeah, we've got carried away a little bit here. I must admit. So it's a populist thing to do, but we could do this wisely. And what we're presenting here is wise, I believe. I guess the question I have for you, Richard, is I'm not too clear. You say that we're going to be communicating to affected property owners. What exactly are we communicating? That wasn't really clear in my head.
I think it became courtesy notification because the legislation allows municipalities to not give notification if it affects more than 10 parcels of land owned by more than 10 owners, different owners. So notification is not a requirement of giving the bylaw readings. However, it is our common process to do so prior to giving bylaw readings. And it was staff's recommendation to provide that prior to giving the readings.
Okay, that's great. That's actually really good. Thank you. Councillor Jensen, you want to make the motion, please?
Thank you, Worship. And so you're right, Mr. Mayor, that I did hear Councillor Olsen make a motion, but I'm not clear as to which one that was. Okay, so
But
there's
there's
4
options.
staff recommendations with 4 different options. So I don't want to step on anyone's toes. I'm happy to be seconder. Or, sorry.
There's 4 options.
But I wanted clarity on exactly which option that was. So it's option 1. I am not going to second that, but I will say that my intention was to move the option number 2, which was the more immediate option. But I'll yield and we can circle back. Thank you, Your Worship.
Yeah, I don't think Councillor Olsen.
There's no seconder for Councillor Olsen's
She
motion.
didn't make the motion, no. Okay. Didn't take it. It was more of a comment at that time.
So if we're happy with where it lands, because I was happy to be a seconder for somebody else, but if that's not a formal motion, then I'm happy to move option number 2, and I'm happy to motivate. Thank you, Your Worship.
Okay, is there a seconder for Councillor Jensen? Okay, thank you. Councillor Grove is seconding that, and please motivate.
Thank you. Just briefly, because it's all been said, there's an issue of immediacy here, and I've already heard in the community from someone that there's people sniffing around for land. We're ripe with a lot of commercial land, and it's opportunistic. It was opportunistic in 2022, and the whole reason this came forward is because people were looking for land and moving their lots out from the core area, which we'd seen some move out this way, not necessarily us specifically, but to the West Shore. So in essence, I was looking to put the brakes on that, or at least get a say. So I'm in favor of the second option, which is move to an immediate bylaw. And I think the bylaw is well considered and well laid out. And we're not saying no. We're not saying no.
Well, we're not saying close that shop.
Yeah.
So we're not saying you have to leave. Thank you, Councillor Day. This is about this council and the community getting a say on future operations. So I think there is a lot of latitude in here, and it's not, it's not that we're trying to stifle or impact somebody's existing business. We're looking to have a say for future. And that's about all I have to say. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you very much. Councillor Grove, anything further as the seconder? Okay, thank you. Any other discussion? Not seeing a lot, so I'll call the question. All those in favor? And those opposed? Okay. Councillor Jordison and Councillor Olsen opposed. Thank you very much. And I'm just going to take a 3-minute recess for a health break, please. Thank you. Thank you. I will call us out of recess right now. And the next two items are our corporate officer, Marcy Lalande. She will introduce. Over to you, Marcy.
Thank you, Your Worship. So the draft accessibility plan is being presented to council for consideration to make staff or to direct staff to make the draft plan available for public comment at City Hall and on the city's website. Once public comment has been completed, staff intend to report back to council for approval. And the Capital West Accessibility Advisory Committee has created the first joint accessibility plan in accordance to the Accessible BC Act. The plan was created with a unified approach for all 7 participating municipalities, while also addressing the unique needs of each municipality through tailored plans. Our goal is to make Colwood increasingly welcoming, inclusive, and culturally engaging for both employees and the city's programs and services. So 2 surveys were conducted to gather the input and identify barriers to municipal service delivery, and employment and public engagement sessions were held in July of 2024 that was led by consultant Changing Paces. The partner municipalities on the committee are utilizing similar opening and closing sections, but the core of the draft plan is specific to each of the municipalities. The City of Colwood Accessibility Plan was developed based on the insights from the Changing Paces reports, and staff have summarized the recommendations, which were then reviewed by all the city departments. The report includes staff input on what the city has accomplished, current initiatives, and potential future actions, and to enhance accessibility. The plan will guide as accessibility-related service delivery and employment improvements moving towards a barrier-free community. The current committee is transitioning to community representation, and Colwood is taking over hosting starting February 26. Public feedback will be crucial to refining and finalizing the document, and I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Marcy. Any questions, council? Pretty straightforward. Anyone want to move the staff recommendation? Okay, thank you. Councillor Olson and Councillor Grove. Discussion? Seeing none, I'll ask the question. Any opposed? Seeing none, motion carries unanimous. Thank you very much, Marcy. 7.5, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. So staff are looking for council to provide direction to bring forward quarterly council resolutions progress report. The comprehensive report details the progress of all council resolutions. It aims to enhance transparency and to ensure accurate tracking of progress on various resolutions. It will also identify delays and enable prompt issue resolution and efficient resource allocation. This information will help council members stay informed and make decisions based on up-to-date information and to prioritize resources effectively. So a comprehensive review has been conducted of all council resolutions from 2012 to date, and to ensure that past resolutions requiring direction were actioned and completed. The quarterly report will record the status of each resolution as complete, in progress, or on hold. It does not include decisions that do not require further action, such as adoption of minutes and bylaws, or motions that are just received for information. The report will identify the department that's responsible for each of the actions. Corporate services will continuously review these resolutions to ensure the content is current and that council has the opportunity to review the information on a quarterly basis. This tool will also inform corporate reporting, including strategic planning, budget discussions, annual work plans, and the annual report. So council is encouraged to endorse the report and to adopt the practice of quarterly reviews to maintain accountability and transparency. I thank you for your attention, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Marcy. Mr. Johnson, you can see there's a few outstanding items. And this is why I was starting to look at, I'm questioning, all the person years now on any new initiatives, because we've got to clean up a bunch of old ones right now, never mind the new ones. So just take that into account in all your planning. Anyways, I shall turn it over to Councillor Olson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Marcy, that's a beast of a 492 pages, I think it was. And I actually did take the time to not read every single one, like I didn't, but I did kind of go through the all council resolutions one and kind of tallied up like how many were active, how many were in process, how many were deferred. And I think what would have been helpful for me would be to just have like a list of all that were incomplete compiled into one document. And I think that would be helpful for council to be able to see like from 2012 to now, like just a list that are incomplete instead of mixing them all in, because you got to sort of scroll through it and it's kind of hard on the eyes. That would be helpful to see. A couple of questions that I had. What's the difference between active and in process? Like, I feel like it's the same. And also when something is assigned, like where does it go? Like it's just says assigned. My own curiosity, I didn't understand that.
Sorry, the first question was
What was the difference between active and in process? Is that not the same thing?
It is, but I believe that in process would mean that it's partially been started, whereas the other one maybe has not. So going forward in the new listings that are coming before council, it will include a percentage of the amount of complete of each project that's on there, each resolution.
Okay.
So it'll be coming back to you with like a 25%, 50%, 75% to give you a better understanding of where it is in that process. Yes.
And then just two more questions. Assigned. So what is that? What does that mean?
It might just be that that was the type of terminology that was used at the time, that it was assigned to a specific department for action.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And this is probably not the place to bring this up, or maybe it is, but I'm going to anyway. January 13th, 2025, there was a resolution, staff review the city of Colwood's animal control bylaw in relation to dangerous animals. And that was something that stood out to me because we've been talking about that a lot lately. And that implies that we're not doing a fulsome review of the animal control bylaw where it relates to feeding of wildlife and securing animal attractants. So I just wanted to highlight that to our CAO right now, specifically. Not that I want to get into talking about all of these incomplete. Anyways, I just wanted to point that out, but I just wanted to also thank you for the work, and I will leave that there. Thank you.
Mr. Johnson.
Thank you, Mayor Kobayashi, through to Councillor Olsen. This was a great amount of work that all of our staff had to put together to get this list in front of council. And from a good governance perspective, we're going to do this every quarter so that you can see how the goalposts have moved. And I just ask for a little bit of indulgence as we try and refine this list, and your feedback about in process, our percentage and when that's complete, and as well as a prediction of when council might see that again is something that we'll also be putting that into the chart so that we can balance all of that together. And in terms of the animal control bylaw and in terms of feeding and all the rest of that good stuff, that is in process. It will be coming forward to council. That's not something that has been lost in the list. It has been something I've been speaking with our staff about bringing a report to council, particularly considering the ongoing events that led to that review. And we're expecting to have a report to council with that and with recommendations next month.
Thank you for that clarification. Yeah, I just wanted to ensure that we were doing a fulsome review of that animal control bylaw because it's just very specific to dangerous animals. So thank you for that clarity.
Thank you very much, Councillor Olsen. Councillor Jordison.
Thank you, Mayor. I could have missed it because it's a very large document, but I just wanted to ask, I did make a motion about developer money in elections and that sort of thing. And I'm wondering if that is what is now titled that council refer to staff to reduce or to receive a legal opinion and return to council with a recommendation. Would that be it?
Thank you, Councillor Jordison. Yes, I believe that is the motion, and it will be coming back before council probably within the next few months.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Great. And just so that council feels good about this, I think this is an outstanding initiative. But there's something else that I just want to reiterate around the table here. We get a lot of emails to mayor and council, and my office actually tracks every one of those. So I can tell you the status of every one of them. So either they're answered, if it's political, I respond to it. And if it's operational, I send it to the CEO for response, and he makes sure that you're CC'd on. Just so that you know that we also have that tracking. So they're all responded to. Everything is responded to. Just so that you have that comfort. Didn't need to just figure that 7 different opinions was not probably the best way to answer some of these political things. So I've been doing those. Councillor Ward, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Along those lines, but a little out of left field here, because this this progress update includes a comprehensive listing of these motions. They then form part of the agenda of the evening, which would allow anyone on council then to address a motion contained within there. So, you know, I'm looking back and there's a large number of them that remain active that can be dealt with. But one in particular jumped out at me from April 27th, 2020. And it was something that I recall that is very unpopular in my area of the community in Royal Bay. It was a motion, ironically, again, from 27th April 2020, that staff returned to council within 1 month with a scoping report on implementing pay parking for all public parking in the landing, the commons, the transition zone, Latoria South and Royal Beach. So obviously, whether it's active or not, it certainly didn't come back in a month. But I would like to, and maybe a procedural question, from what I can understand, I could at this moment make a motion to rescind that. And if allowable, maybe Mr. Johnson can chime in on that. I'd like to make a motion to rescind that April 27, 2020 parking request.
We can do that. I thought we did answer that. I thought it was a dead issue. I can't remember.
It shows active, so I'd like to kill it if possible.
I'm pretty sure it was killed. You may want to, before I ask for another motion to kill it, can you just check on that one again? I've got this feeling that we killed that.
I can take a review at it and bring it back to the next council meeting if it is still not been acted on. So you can possibly consider rescinding it if you'd like.
Mr. Johnson?
This is the problem when you have a list and we're trying to remember what happened 5 years ago as opposed to remember what happened each quarter. And for this particular item, I'm not, council's rescinded. Absolutely, that's council purview and wish. But if it was that we were supposed to come back in a month, well, we want to deal with that within the next quarter so that it doesn't become 5 years later. And is it still valid? What do we do? How do we fit it together? This is good governance principles. And certainly the intention is for any of these items that are outstanding, this is council's opportunity. Where are we at with this? Like, is this still relevant? And it's an omnibus report, which makes it pretty difficult to go through all of the stuff from the past. What we'll do in the future, given that they're completed, we'll only be including the stuff that hasn't been completed in lists moving forward now that you've seen all of this upcoming. And that would be the intention behind the report, to continue to refine it and make sure that it meets council's governance objectives, that we're following council's direction and completing those tasks as assigned by council.
Thank you very much, Mr. Johnson.
I was just going to say, in this particular case, though, as per the city officer, if this one is still active, I would like it to be brought to the next agenda with my motion to rescind.
Absolutely. Yeah, the fact that I'm still here and not hung, I think is a pretty good indication that we killed it. I remember how emotional it was. Correct. Yeah, we killed it. That's what I remember. Anyways, does someone like to make the motion, please? Okay, thank you very much. Seconder, Councilor Jensen. Grove and Jensen. Yeah. Discussion, seeing none. Any opposed? Seeing none, motion carries unanimous. We'll move on, please. That is, we're getting on to bylaws. Right on. Okay, could you, I'll turn this bylaw number 175102, 2025 Colwood Officers Amendment Bylaw, first and second, third read. Over to you, Mr. Johnson, please.
This is for council's consideration. This is to designate the chief administrative officer as well as the deputy chief administrative officer, adding that as an officer position that council would have to appoint once this bylaw is adopted by council. It's not establishing new positions. That would be done by council through another process. This is just allowing this to happen. So there is no appointment in this regard. It is just first 3 readings and cleaning up some administrative issues in the officers bylaw. Thank you,
very
Mr.
much. Thank you. Questions? Motion, please. Councillor Day, seconder, Councillor Ward, and Councillor Day. Go ahead, please. Discussion. Oops, sorry.
Sometimes it doesn't cooperate. I just wanted to check, it twigged me when you said it's no new positions. I didn't realize that we'd had a deputy corporate officer before. I thought that was new. And I'm fine, but I just thought that was new.
I will call the question then. All those in favor? Any opposed? Unanimous, motion carries. And now we go to 8.2, which is the land use bylaw number 151, item 7.3 for first and second and third reading. Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Jensen moves it. Seconder, Councillor Olson. Discussion. Seeing none. Any opposed? Seeing none, motion carries. May I please get a motion to close the meeting to the public, please? Thank you, Councillor Olson, Councillor Jensen. Any opposed? Seeing none, we will close the meeting.